Next, in track B, we're heading into the virtualization. Yongkang Jia and Xiao Lei from Singular Security Lab presenting their work on bug tamer. They'll demonstrate how a limited heap overflow was tamed into a full VMware escape, turning constraints into capability. Please welcome Yongkang and Xiao on the stage.
Okay, let's start. Hello, everyone. We are super excited to be here to share our research with all of you. And our topic is bug tamer turning limit heap overflow into full VMware escape. First of all, please allow us to introduce ourselves. My name is Yongkang Jia, and this is Xiao Lei. We are from Singular Security Lab. Our research primarily focuses on virtualization, including QEMU, KVM, VirtualBox, VMware, and other NetWare hypervisors. Over the past 3 years, we have conducted research on virtual I/O devices and achieved 3 QEMU escape exploits, and we shared this research at some conferences. Okay, this talk is divided into 4 parts. First is a brief introduction. So let's talk something about VMware escape. VMware escape means you can control VM process in the host when you just run a programming guest. There's a lot of public VM escape researches in recent years, primarily focused on QEMU, KVM, VirtualBox, and VMware. So why did we choose VMware for our research? First, VMware is a hot topic in virtualization security. It's consistently a high-value target at competitions like Pong2Own. Second, there's a wealth of public research available, from conference talks to technical blogs. That's very helpful for getting started. And VMware has a relatively mature ecosystem of analysis, making it more accessible for newcomers, while still offering depth for advanced researchers. Third, and perhaps most compelling, VMware is closed source, unlike QEMU or VirtualBox. This adds a significant layer of challenge. No source code means heavier reverse engineering, deeper analysis, and creative bug hunting. For us, the mystery and the challenge made attacking VMware especially appealing. Yes. So how did we get started with our VMware research? First, we learned from a VMware-related talk at Black Hat USA 2024. That's the EXSR unfilling release contained debugging symbols. We found that specific version, and having those symbols significantly eased our reverse engineering. Second, during conversation with some researchers from Theory at Hexacon 2024, we were advised that reproducing n-day vulnerabilities is an effective way to quickly get up to speed, and with a bit of luck, might even lead to discovering similar previously unknown issues. After reviewing some VMware research in recent years, we decided to focus on USB devices. Specifically, we chose to reproduce the vulnerability that Theory demonstrated at last year's Pong2Own, which is a virtual Bluetooth device implemented over USB. That's when we dove into reverse engineering USB devices emulation in VMware. Okay, let's briefly look at how USB devices work in VMware. When a guest operating system wants to communicating with a USB device, it first sends a USB packet to VMware Virtual USB Controller. VMware supports 3 types of USB controllers: UHCI, EHCI, and XHCI. the selected USB controller then passes the incoming USB packet from the guest into URBs. URB is a USB request blocks, which are passed to the appropriate USB backend device for processing, such as Bluetooth, smart card, HID, and so on. As well known, vulnerabilities often arise where data is processed. In the USB workflow we just described, there are two primary points where data handling occurs, and thus where bugs are most likely to hide. First, the USB controller itself, which passes the raw USB packet sent by guest OS. Second, the USB backend devices, which consume the URBs generated by the controller and interpret higher level protocols, such as passing Bluetooth commands, decoding video parameters, or handling smart card data. These two layers, controller passing and the back protocol interpretation, are prime targets for security research. So let's take a look at the UHCI and the EHCI. UHCI and UHCI using TD, which means transfer description, and QH, that's Q heads to transfer data from guest to host. And the TD structure and the QH structure are linked to transfer data. The frame pointer is an guest physical address that we can control in the guest. So the TD structure and its data and the QH structure and its data is fully controlled by guest. Yes, with this understanding in place, we laid out a clear three-step plan. First, reverse engineering the USB packet passing logic in the UHCI and the EHCI controllers. Second, dive into the Bluetooth backend to understand how it processes URBs. It essentially reverse the Bluetooth protocol implementation. And third, ideally, discovering new vulnerabilities along the way. Yes, sounds perfect, right? So we started executing the plan step by step, only to hit an unexpected twist almost immediately. Before we even fully unraveled how EHCI and EHCI worked, something interesting happened. Yes, quite fortunately, we stumbled upon a time of check to time of use bug in the EHCI handler. Here is a procedure code snippet of function EHCI handle QH. So first, it reads setup packet data from the guest buffer pointer from the first time. Second, it allocates a URB object whose size is hexa 98 plus W length and plus 8. The W length comes from the setup packet, so which can be controlled by guest. Third, it reads setup packet data for the second time and store them in the allocated URB data buffer. So it's a classical TOCTOU bug occurs. And this bug is both in UHCI and EHCI devices. So next, we needed to determine whether this vulnerability was actually exploitable. Since we now had a URB that could be manipulated via TOCTOU transition, our focus naturally shifted to the second stage of the pipeline, how URBs are processed by the USB backend devices. We began reverse engineering various USB backends such as Bluetooth, HID, and virtual video and others to understand how they consume and interpret URB data. Looking for any opportunity, whether it's this TOCTOU bug could be due to memory corruption or other exploitable behavior. Finally, we discovered some interesting in the virtual video device, with which the TOCTOU bug could be leveraged to achieve a limited out-of-bound read and out-of-bound write primitive. There are two key code parts here. The first involves setting the UVC parameters, and the second copies those UVC parameters into an extra data buffer. Crucially, the maximum allowed value for W length is hexa22. Now, let's take a closer look at how this hexa22-byte heap-based out-of-bound read and the corresponding out-of-bound write actually occur. Let's start with URB 0, where W length is set to 0 first, meaning the extra data buffer has 0 length. Next, we leverage the TOCTOU vulnerability to modify the W length, changing it from 0 to hexa22 after the URB is allocated with W length is 0, which leads the URB backend to believe that a legitimate hexa22-byte extra data buffer is available, even though the originally allocated buffer was only 0 bytes long. Next, the virtual video device copies the extra data into the UVC parameter structure, which is shown as a green block. We then craft a second URB. Let's call it URB1, with W length legitimately set to hexa22 from the start. This time, the URB backend allocates a proper extra data buffer of size hexa22 to hold the incoming data. When the virtual video device processing this URB, it copies the provided hexa22 bytes into the UVC parameters that are from Heap Overflow under URB 0, which could lead a OOB read. Yeah. Conversely, if we first craft the URB 0 with a legitimate W length of hexa22, the virtual video device will allocate a properly sized extra buffer hexa22 bytes and safely copy it to provide the data into UVC parameters. Yes, this time, no overflow occurs at this stage. Then, we follow the same strategy and craft a second URB, yes, URB1, with W length set to 0. In this scenario, after the initial URB1 with legitimate W length is equals hexa22 had already populated the UVC parameter structure with a tag-controlled data. URB1 triggered an operation that reads from the UVC parameters back into extra data. But now, because the W length is 0, the backend assumes no data should be copied. However, if we exploit the TOCTOU vulnerability once again, this time modify W length from 0 to hexa22, then a heap overflow write will be triggered. From now, we get a heap overflow read and a heap overflow write primitives. Yes, and now we had a reliable method to turn the TOCTOU bug into a limited heap-based out-of-bound read and out-of-bound write primitives. The next challenge was how do we actually trigger into virtual video device? In VMware workstation, we quickly hit a wall. There's no option to attach a virtual video device. We try to connect a wider range of physical video devices, such as webcams, USB video capture card, and other UVC component hardware. But when we are consistently immutated them as generic USB devices, bypassing the virtual video backend entirely. After extensive testing, we realized the root issue. The virtual video device is simply not initialized in VMware Workstation or ESXi. The relevant code path exists in the binaries, but the subsystem was never activated. That left us with one last hope: VMware Fusion on macOS. And indeed, VMware Fusion does initialize the virtual video device when a compatible USB video peripheral is connected. Leveraging this, we were finally able to route our malicious URB through the vulnerable video backend and successfully trigger the heap overflow right in VMware Fusion. This became our viable exploitation service. So, how do we achieve a full VMware escape with just a single limited heap overflow primitive? That's where my teammates Xiao Lei take over. He will show you exactly how we turn this constrained heap corruption into a complete VMware escape. Yeah.
Now I will demonstrate how I leverage this vulnerability in VMware Fusion of version 13.5.2 to achieve VM escape on macOS, both Intel and Apple Silicon. Since my personal computer is a MacBook M1 Pro, and I choose to start my exploration from this platform to develop the VM escape exploit. The first challenge was clearly ASLR bypass. As previously discussed, this time of check to time of use vulnerability provides only a limited out-of-bounds read primitive. Means we're only capable of reading just hex 12 bytes beyond the URB object. Since our reverse engineering work just covered a very tiny part of the VMware, we failed to find a nice structure to make a direct address information leakage using this limited out-of-bounds read primitive. Therefore, we decided to use the constrained out-of-bounds write primitive combined with the URB objects to achieve effective information disclosure. As this diagram shows, the URB structure contains a critical member variable named actuallen at offset hex 00C. And this field specifies the length of response data inside the URB, and which is readable by the guest operating system. By exploiting out-of-bounds write primitive, we directly override the actuallen in URB0. And to make example, if we set it into value hex 98, it would trick the emulated USB device into treating the subsequent 98 bytes data as valid extra data field for URB0. Therefore, if we place another URB1 immediately after the URB0, URB1 then would become the extra data field of the URB0. Crucially, the URB structure contains a member which is initialized to a data pointer during URB creation time. And this pointer will point to a specific location in the BSS section of VMware's process. And then by submitting a USB transfer descriptor whose packet identification type is in, the emulated USB device will copy URB0's extra data into guest memory. Since the URB0's extra data is just the object URB1, and this will successfully leak the base address of the VMware process. Okay, so far we finished the information disclosure process, and now we will turn to hijacking control flow for code execution. We simply leverage the function VUSB cancel pipe logic in emulated USB device code, and its trigger condition is straightforward. Once the guest operating system submits two setup transfer descriptors with inconsistent setup data, the function USB cancel pipe will be called. To explain how we use VUSB cancel pipe to hijack control flow, we just need to look at its implementation. First of all, the only parameter of the function VUSB cancel pipe, named pipe here, originates from the pointer variable pipe of the URB object, and its offset is hex 18, as the diagram showed. By using out-of-bounds write to hijack this pipe pointer to a crafted pipe object, we could easily hijack the OP cancel pipe function pointer into any value we want. Yeah. And at the same time, the first parameter of OP cancel pipe is also fully controllable. Therefore, a crafted pipe is enough to bring us ability to make arbitrary function call. But here comes two main challenges. First, we are targeting macOS with minimum prior knowledge of its user space heap management implementation, which is definitely required for heap manipulation operations. Second, since there are some data pointers in URB object, we need to find a memory space whose address is already known to place the crafted URB object. Apparently, we might get some heap address information, but it doesn't mean we could write any payload we want to that heap address. For the first challenge, Apple's open source libmalloc implementation provide the solution, and we analyze its internals. Libmalloc uses the zones for allocation strategies, which nanozone handling small size allocation. Nanozone pre-allocates 512 megabytes region divided into 8 arenas, each of 64 megabyte size. And each arena splits into 4,096 blocks, each of 16 kilobyte size. It's just one page size in Apple. Blocks are categorized as data blocks, which holds user row data, or meta blocks, which is responsible for managing the data blocks allocation state, like how many slots are available on this block and so on. And notably, the number 0 block of each arena is the only meta block, while the other blocks are all data blocks. And due to XOR-based shuffling of block indices, the memory layout of all blocks is randomized, which means the number 0 block is actually not at the beginning of the arena. As for the block, every block will be divided into slots of a certain size. They are the same size and in one block. Yeah, and slot is the smallest allocation unit for user data storage. And unlike the block, the slots indices are not shuffled. Since URB objects in our exploit stay under hex 100 bytes, we focus mainly on nanozone behavior despite the other components of libmalloc's implementation. Because nanozone is responsible for allocations of size range from hex 10 to hex 100. However, libmalloc makes some multi-core optimizations, which also introduce heap manipulations complexity. Specifically, different CPU cores will use distinct blocks for even identical sized allocations. causing unpredictable allocation result. To clarify, as this diagram shows here, for size class hex 10 slots, allocation on CPU 0 uses block 0 managed by meta block 0. And while CPU 2 may access block 3023. If two contiguous allocations of size hex 10 happens on CPU 0 and CPU 0 separately, the returned slot will definitely come from two different blocks. Moreover, since the block space layout is shuffled, doing heap manipulation on blocks would also be challenging. For slot management details, there's a free list used to manage freed slots. And the slot allocation follows the pattern that when the free list is empty, blocks allocate available slots sequentially in increasing index order. And otherwise, they prioritize pre-list entries in last in first out order. Slot indices start from 1, and freed slots are all stored in a member called double free guard, which is an XOR result of slot address and a random cookie to detect double free situations. Based on the knowledge of the libmalloc nanozone, we could return to our exploit development now. To make heap manipulation, first we sprayed URB objects to ensure every CPU core's block had at least one slot allocated. Next, we allocated another 3 URBs, expecting them to reside contiguously within a single core's block. And we don't really need to care about what the core actually is. And third, we just then free these URBs in order URB 0, 1, 2, and populating the free list at slot 3 to 1 in last in first out order. We then relocate 3 URBs again, which results in reversing their memory order. The newest URB occupies the lowest address. Since the emulated USB device handles URBs sequentially, this guarantees URB2 has URB1 adjacent in memory during the process. Critically, step 2, 3, 4 execute within a single USB request to avoid CPU core switching as much as possible, which will improve the exploit success rate. This setup allows triggering the vulnerability on URB2 to overwrite URB1's actual length and leaking URB0's content. Similarly, overwriting URB1's pipe pointer, which with our crafted URB object achieved arbitrary function calls. Now addressing the second challenge, finding home for our crafted pipe object. Initially, even with additional address information like heap address, we still couldn't successfully solve this problem. And we also tried to find arbitrary address write primitive, but we failed. However, while examining VMware's memory space, something interesting appeared. The address of guest RAM's virtual address is quite abnormal. And at first, we thought it might just be an accident. Guest RAM's virtual address must be protected by the ASL write. But after multiple reboots, we found it consistently landed at this fixed address. But why? Clearly, we need to find out where the abnormal address come at first. We further reverse engineering work revealed that VMware Fusion allocates guest RAM via API called Mac VM allocate, which is similar to Linux and map, I think. We then developed a simple Python script to test this by calling Mac VM allocate multiple times with different sizes and check whether the returned address is always the fixed value. As the results showed on the right side, that sufficiently large size requests always make Mac VM allocate returned this fixed address. This changed everything. We could now place crafted pipe objects directly in guest RAM and hijack URB's pipe pointer to hex 208 million plus the guest physical address of pipe object in guest RAM. And this also means no additional address leakage were needed for control flow hijacking process. And having this, we achieved VM escape exploit on MacBook M1 Pro. And now I will demonstrate how the exploit work on MacBook M1 Pro. We can see the version of the VMware Fusion here is 13.5.2. And there are 2 virtual video devices, and I will make an explanation later. And the chipset is MacBook M1 Pro. And we then run the exploit program. You can see the calculator is just popped up. As you can see, beyond the default USB video device, we required an additional USB video device for heap manipulation. Since we had only reverse-engineered UHCI and EHCI and know little about XHCI's implementation details, and the UHCI is absent on Apple Silicon, and other USB devices route through XHCI, so we manually add an extra virtual video devices for this demo. But it doesn't mean that the vulnerability is only exploitable when there are at least 2 virtual video devices. Before pushing forward, we might think, could this fixed guest RAM address simplify the whole exploitation further? Perhaps by crafting pipe objects without any prior info leakage to bypass the ASLR. We haven't tested this. If you're interested, feel free to explore. Now, having conquered the M1 chipset, we now address Intel-based Macs. Unlike M1, the Intel Macs have native UHCI devices, eliminating the need for extra virtual video device. But here comes the question. Unlike Mac Apple Silicon, guest RAM's virtual address is protected by ASLR on Mac Intel. And does this invalidate our former exploit approach? Not quite. In fact, our further analysis showed the offset between the VMware's base address and the guest RAM's virtual address only changes in a range from hex 5 million to hex 6 million. And compared to this changing range, the size of the guest RAM is significantly larger, which is usually several gigabytes. Therefore, since the guest RAM is definitely controllable, and this hex 1 million variance is negligible, which enables ASLR bypass via address collision. And we will then make a detailed explanation on how we bypass the ASLR via address collision. As illustrated from this diagram, guest RAM occupies a variable position within VMware's process memory space. Though we can hijack URB's pipe pointer anywhere in VMware's address space, we want to make sure it lands inside guest RAM's area. At first, we assume that the offset between the VMware's base address and the guest RAM's virtual address is X, which could be any page-aligned value ranging from hex 5 million to hex 6 million. And based on this guest offset, we could prepare a pipe object in guest RAM and make the pipe points to the assumed place. Since the changing space of this offset is at most 16 megabytes, we could populate 16 megabytes guest RAM region with crafted pipe objects at every page boundary. Regardless of the real value of the X, the pipe pointer will always hit a valid pipe object, which eventually helps us bypass the guest RAM's ASLR. And the rest of the exploit just mirrors our M1 methodology. And also, we will demonstrate this Intel-based exploit via recorded video. You can see the chipset is Intel cores. And the version is also 13.5.2. And the calculator is popped up. At this conclusion part, we want to summarize a probably universal heap overflow exploitation framework towards VMware Fusion on Mac platform. And if we had an out-of-bound write primitive, which is capable of writing hex 20 bytes with controlled content, firstly, we can use heap manipulation to place a URB object after the overflowed object. And then we can hijack URB's actual len via out-of-bounds write to achieve out-of-bounds read, and finally disclose VMware's base address. And we can exploit guest RAM's weak ASLR to determine its virtual address or its address range. And then we hijack URB's pipe pointer to craft its object in guest RAM. And finally, we trigger the function VUSB cancel pipe to hijack the control flow. And the whole process will help us make a successful VMware escape. Although the bug is already fixed when we just started our exploit process on VMware Fusion, we still managed to finish the whole exploit for learning and fun. We still give some takeaways for you. First is reproducing old bugs is also a good way to find new ones. And don't care too much about the results, just enjoy the research process yourself. Thank you, that's all. Feel free to ask any question.